In this video, I will be explaining the differences between reactionary Pan-Europeanism and revolutionary Pan-Europeanism. Reactionary Pan-Europeanism is a sense of personal identification with European cultural hegemony. The concept is discussed in the context of European integration, historically in connection with hypothetical proposals. But since the formation of the European Union in the 1990s, increasingly with regard to the project of ever-increasing federalization of the EU, the model of a pan-European Union is Carolingian Empire, which first identified Europe as a cultural entity as the areas ruled by the Roman Catholic Church, later known as the medieval Western Christendom. And this is the moderate version of reactionary Europeanism. The very best example of far-right reactionary Pan-Europeanism is Faith Goldie. Revolutionary Pan-Europeanism cannot be traced back to any one political movement but has come and gone and returned here and there. Revolutionary Pan-Europeanism is the cultural shaking off of the artificial and colonial indoctrination of whiteness. White identity is based on Western Christendom, but it lives beyond this. The reference to white is largely a British concept, yet the roots of whiteness go back to the Spanish Inquisition. The archetypal Crusader knight against the Saracen dark Moorish Muslim. This is the origin of whiteness, and this same whiteness is a continuation of cultural genocide. Jewish people thrived under the rule of Islamic Spain and even the Ottoman Empire, yet in Christian lands Jews were always blamed for the theological reasons of whiteness. Less and less Euro people in the USA and Canada embrace the term white, yet opposition to whiteness is treated fringe. Revolutionary Pan-Europeanism should be led by Euro-Americans or Euro-Canadians because the true answer is to go back to the places where these problems began. Why could there not have been radical change in the European lands rather than having to make settlements in the lands of others? The constitutional values enjoyed in Canada and the US should be propagated in Europe, where they are overdue. There is nothing chauvinistic about what I have said. There is no agenda to force this on anyone. If you are Irish, this is not white. If you are mixed European, then you are mixed European, not a white person. If you are English, this is not white. If you are Welsh, this is not white. If you are Scottish, this is not white. If you are French, this is not white. If you are Jewish European, you definitely are not white, and you may not have Oriental ancestry. If you are Polish, you are not white. If you are Spanish, you are not white. If you are Greek, you are not white. There are no white people. Race does not exist. Ethnicity exists. Ethnicity is a common ancestry and ancestral collectivization. White pride is bullshit. White guilt is bullshit. Despite my distrust towards the very words Canadian and American, these words, and even a few of the notions behind them, are more capable of redemption than whiteness, which can never be redeemed at all. Blackness has already been defined by black people. I have already said a lot about blackness, and I have no interest in going further into something that's really not my place to say much other than what I have already said many times before. Blackness is valid. Revolutionary Pan-Europeanism can go further into a Back to Europe movement. The Back to Europe movement is new, by the way. I'm not the best at explaining it, the Back to Europe movement, so I have asked Comrade Net to cover this part of the video for me.
This is political proselytizing, nothing more. This catches on a lot more than most who first hear about this tend to assume. With mass amounts of Euro-Americans and Euro-Canadians traveling to Europe, not just in touring, but by going out and meeting the local population, statistically, many will wish to leave their settler homes in favor of European homes. A great many Euro-Americans and Euro-Canadians have already gone through this process. Doing this creates breeding room for black and indigenous people, as well as Asians, Arabs, and even Europeans that are of low population within the continent. Now, of course, I'm making the application to the context of North America, but this applies to New Zealand, Australia, and the Zionist state as well. There's nothing to fear from this, because, I mean, from the way I've looked at this, everyone's really just blown this out of proportion like they tend to do everything else. Of course, then again, I suppose it's the way that things are packaged that makes the difference. Now, of course, what I've said here does not explain everything, but this is the actual general idea that you should have on this topic.
Jewish Europeans in the USA and Canada tend to be the quickest of any Euro collective to embrace revolutionary Pan-Europeanism. The Back to Europe movement is rooted in Jewish Euro-American dissent against Zionism and Americanism as a part of a greater anti-colonial movement. The Back to Europe movement is not exclusively Jewish. There are many Irish Americans interested in this. Indeed, so much that the majority of those subscribing to Back to Europe happen to be Irish Americans, and a growing number of Irish Canadians as well. If you are a Jewish European, you may have some Oriental descent. Clearly, this does not apply to all Jewish Europeans, but it does apply to both the Ashkenazi and Sephardi Jews. European Jews are not always super rich, middle class, or pro-Zionist. The IRA is not a terrorist organization, and there is no justifying the monarchy. Celts and Romans had an antagonism, and in some ways still do. Revolutionary Pan-Europeanism is about changing the deeply distorted roots of Christendom, not Catholicism as a whole, but the culture that it created with the Crusades and the Inquisition. How can anyone expect to end capitalism if we are unwilling to investigate the true roots of capitalism, which we cannot just render as saying historical feudalism in Europe? At the same time, capitalism was born out of European culture as well as the material seeds of feudalism in Europe. Revolutionary Pan-Europeanism is about redeeming European culture because by itself there is nothing wrong with it. It is the culture of Christendom, which came from Europe, that must be removed. This is not about undoing Catholicism, because Christendom was in Protestantism too. The culture of Christendom applies to new atheism and other forms of secular extremism, now more so than even Christian fundamentalism. We see this as it feeds into the radlibs. Whiteness began as Christendom, and it is the soul of the first world. Post-Christian European influences are the root of whiteness, as well as first worldism, not Islam, not Judaism.